What a quiet morning it is, full of freshness and vigor. And silent beauty. When the mind is profoundly silent and open. In touch. What is there to worry about? Or for that matter, to talk about? So somehow the computer has to be turned on to think of something. Bring something up into display, which is the first day of retreat. First talk of retreat, which we usually use to talk about a new kind of listening. Fresh listening, looking, touching, sensing. No, not just sensing, perceiving. Which is more than sensing. It is perceiving what goes on in the senses. In which the Buddhists wisely have included thinking. It's one of the senses. What goes on in the thinking mind, in the listening, looking, remembering, wanting, fearing. What is all of that? And can a new listening reveal our foundations in thinking as well as non-thinking? When I say listening, a new kind of listening, I don't just mean listening with the ears, peep, 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 the bird. We can listen to it and hear it. That listening stands for all senses open and in touch in a fresh way with what is going on inside and outside. So if you may be hard of hearing, sometimes people come here who are hard of hearing. Listening does not mean just hearing with the ears. It's hearing with the eyes, as is said in Zen, and listening. With listening with the eyes and looking with the ears. This total openness of being. Which may reveal a new world, which is not the world of our stories and the connected emotions, what we've called this whole me network, which obscures and distorts and hides what is actually happening from moment to moment. Does the thought arise, as would be natural, to think, how can I get this new listening? I want to learn about it. I want to learn it. maybe the first thing that needs to be felt and perceived and touched is all the obstacles that are in the way. Get in touch with the 1,000,001 agenda rolling in the mind and body, which prevent this openness of being, to become aware of agenda, of expecting, anticipating, wanting, knowing. I know what you're like, because I've known you for a long time. And that knowledge, that cluster of images and memories, prevents an innocent looking. Which, when it does happen, this innocent looking may prove to be contagious. Someone else may feel that they are not projected upon. That we all have a second chance, regardless of what we said and did in the past, to be seen and heard and look afresh. In this immediate presence of openness, in which all the gross and subtle agendas are revealed. They show themselves, sometimes very hesitatingly, sometimes very vaguely, because we don't want to see them. We want to continue with habit. That's our security. That's where we feel safe and alive, running in habits of thinking, of projecting, of knowing, of remembering. We couldn't survive without this mechanism, almost perfected in the brain. So the brain doesn't have to look afresh every time to find out whether something is hot or too cold, dangerous. A very useful survival mechanism to record in a memory what has been experienced and then project it onto the next moment. But the next moment doesn't happen to be like the past experience most of the time. Fire is always hot and ice is always cold. But human beings may change, or not change, but have so many different aspects to us, many of which are never tapped, never challenged, or given a chance to show themselves. We may be rough or dominating, controlling. I don't need to everybody look for themselves what we think we are and what we think the others are. But that's not all we are. It's so amazing that maybe in a non-threatening, loving environment, someone may show different sides. A good friend recently who came to a retreat in Germany, she hadn't been to a retreat in a long time. She said afterwards, it's absolutely amazing how retreat brings out the best in us. It has to be taken with a grain of salt. It can also bring out the worst in us. Or may be surprised at one's anger or hurt. Gets a note about some kitchen work one hasn't done right, or already thinking somebody's on one's back. Who are you to tell me these kind of things? Everything reveals itself much more intensely in retreat. So don't be surprised. not just if you're here for the first time. An amazing phenomenon of retreating over long periods of time is that one may become more sensitive to all the movements of this organism. Fear, anxiety, anger, upset. Much more in touch with it, because the only explanation I can find is the resistances have worn down. The self-protectiveness may diminish, and so we're not sort of cotton-wooled in our relationships. Everything is more right out there, but also can be seen so much quicker. And if the seeing is clear, and doesn't get hindered by wanting to persist in a habit, one sees the strength of attachment, but doesn't go with it, then what comes up can drain away amazingly quickly, opening the way for this marvelous energy, which is an energy of aliveness. Sometimes I call it good cheer or joy. Not jumping up and down with happiness, but something you may know it yourself, have experienced it yourself. And the art of keeping that open so it can always manifest itself again in the midst of all the stuff that a human being is burdened with, has to deal with. The stuff of wiring in memories, in painful memories, memories of hurt, of being no good or of being phenomenally good. All these ideas which overlay like thick cloud covers this innocent energy of life, of being, of relating. Freshly, throwing light on our conditioning, so burdensome and yet so effervescent when this energy manifests. So how do we listen to ourselves, to all the movements of thought and memory and emotion that may arise in a retreat where there's no or not much distraction? There's virtually a withdrawal from our usual distractions, noise distractions, media, work distractions. I'm calling it distraction. Work is not necessarily a distraction, particularly wholeheartedly with it. But I mean here, if anxious thoughts or upsetting ideas or the confusion of one's daily problems that one has brought here, when they surface, occupy the body-mind, there's little to go to except, of course, the woods. Maybe the woods is not little to go to. The woods, the meadows, the up and down hills and sounds and fragrances. But not our usual way of calling on the phone or throwing ourselves into another project or turning on radio or television. Maybe it is already on. So, stuff manifesting, the unsolved problems of our life, the confusions, fears, angers, resentments, grudges, or longings for pleasure that the brain can so amazingly project and get a lot of physical satisfaction from it. How do we meet it all without getting totally caught up in it, which is what usually happens, at least for periods of time. So totally caught up that we don't realize we're fantasizing or daydreaming. We're in an unreal world projected by thinking and imaging and the emotions that are connected with it. How do we realize that it is just thinking and fantasizing and daydreaming and engaging story in which we play, of course, the most important part? How do we realize it? Talking about it, does that help? To wake up to the fact I'm involved in a story. I'm reacting to remembrances and to what the brain is creatively capable of fabricating out of these remembrances and anticipating a difficult future. How can we realize that this is brain work going on and stop and look and listen afresh for a moment? Hear the birds talking. Hear the breath. Feel it, not just hear it. Breathing without knowing. We know that we breathe with a nose and that it goes down, or that the diaphragm is involved. In the last retreat there was a person who for 6 years has practiced following the breathing, and she told me where she starts to follow it, namely at the nostrils, and proceeded to describe what she has observed. By knowing that and following that, can there be awareing that breath is everywhere? I don't know where it starts or where it ends, what all is involved with it. All one could say is this entire organism, totally in touch with the entire universe, in this thing we call breathing. I don't mean philosophizing about it, which lends itself to that. It sounded like that the way I put it. Bringing in the universe, what's that? But realizing one is stuck in visualization and idea, and wondering what it is without that. What is this thing called breathing if I don't even call it breathing? And maybe for moments at a time, a gentle listening, which is the breeze in the trees and the chirping of birds and this amazing movement of being, which of course includes everything, heartbeat and sensations and tensions and pains, but begin to leave the words out, because the words may hide. I'm using lots of words, but they're not spoken to hide, but to reveal what is actually truly wordless, happening before I know it. Once I know it, it's already over, it's already fresh. So, knowing how I breathe, as an example, is an obstacle to breathing in a fresh way, listening without knowing. and to realize maybe how difficult it is. Sometimes people tell me I have to think first before I can hear something. That's an illusion. But it shows the powerful dominance of the thinking mind, telling itself it has to think first before it can hear the bird. Before you think about it, isn't it there? Now it stopped. And to begin to discern wisely what is thinking and what is direct perceiving. That a direct perception, which includes all the senses, is different from thinking about it. Thinking it was good, it's bad, I don't like it, or just verbalizing about what I'm doing. And see how difficult it is. Come in touch with that difficulty. How difficult it is to verbalize about I'm doing this and I'm doing that without immediately judging it. I'm doing it well or I'm doing it poorly. I'm making progress or I'm failing. Others do it better. I'm doing it better than others. These can be gross movements or very, very subtle movements that go with this constant commentary upon ourselves, produced by the thinking, knowing, remembering brain. Notice I haven't said I'm doing that. I may say that at times because it's our habitual way of expressing ourselves, but very dangerous in that it constantly reinforces this deeply held conviction that there is an I, an agent, agency that is responsible for all of this. I'm doing this, I'm thinking, I'm listening, I'm doing well. What is this I? Can we listen to it as it is being verbalized or defended? Maybe a feeling of anxiety, hearing there may not be an I, it's all thinking. If I'm not my thoughts, what I know, what am I? And a queasiness in the stomach or wherever. Can we behold it all as the breeze moves the leaves? Birds are calling. So is the first step not the grasping and groping for this new listening, but getting in touch with the encumbrances, the obstacles, the thoughts, the fears, without trying to get rid of them or fight them or defend them. Just behold them as we watch the clouds gathering and dissipating in the sky. Watch the judgments and then judging the judgments. as being bad or an obstacle. And still there's something behind that that awares it all. You can't put your finger on what that is. Thought wants to capture it, and it does. It says, I'm aware. But what is this I? If not a product of thinking? It's such a relief not to have to know. And let things happen as they do anyways. So, in listening, is there expectation of what I want to get? Then listen to the rumble of expectation. The whole organism is involved when there's expectation. It sort of gets geared up in a direction. You can feel that. Is there comparison? How do I rate in comparison to others, or whichever way it expresses itself? Listen to the buzz of comparison as it comes into awareness. Dropping the objects of comparison and listening to what it does, physically, organismically. And maybe finding that in listening in this way, the expectation or comparison dies down. It has no food because it's being attended to wholesomely, not just thinking about it, but feeling the physical setup of anticipating or wanting or fearing. Really listening to it. It's amazing. After breakfast, I was lying down. I had talked to Kyle over the phone. And there were some thoughts stirring in the mind. Some things were not quite in order. And of course, the mind wants to make order, and sometimes it can't make order because it's impossible. And then there come some motions of anxiety. It was sort of, in this case, the heart beating in the throat. Maybe because the throat wants to talk it out and can't. And then realizing this, it can't, the futility of this particular movement, and just giving total attention, effortlessly, to what was going on there. Heartbeat in the throat, which was at first felt as something unpleasant or something the body wanted to shake. That's its conditioned response. But this conditioned response doesn't need to take place when there is attention. It's an amazing process or non-process, which includes this element of not wanting any result whatsoever. not wanting, just what's there, and not knowing what's there. Sort of a total involvement by total non-involvement. And for a few moments must have dropped off to sleep. Woke up and this whole thing was gone. So we talk very often, and it's talked very broadly, generally, about be with it. And that's a very fine art of being with something without the conditioned drive to do something about it, or repress it, or tackle it, or brace oneself, or think it's wrong. All of these movements need to be exposed and not gone with. Exposure takes care of that, not going with it. So there's just left what has never been seen before. And that too does not remain. There's another one of those conditioned thoughts. This is going to be here now for a long time, probably forever. How we think. It's been here forever, it's going to be here forever. Not that we spell it out like this, but it's a certain disposition of the mind to assume that, and it's a totally false assumption. Maybe it's so strong because thought can endlessly repeat and repeat and repeat the same thing. But living conditions change. They don't fixate like thought fixates. So we're coming to the second part of what we usually talk about on the first day, and that is creating authority, establishing authority, following authority. And it's so conditioned into the brain to want authority, somebody one can trust, believe, follow, imitate. At the same time, protesting against it. Because basically, fundamentally, we want to be free. Mostly free to do what we like. That's the superficial aspect of freedom. What I'm referring to, maybe I don't have the right word, a better one will come, because I've recently got in trouble with this word authority again, last retreat. and justifiably so, because people say, I want an authority, I want to hear somebody talk who talks authoritatively, meaning they seem to know what they're saying or be in touch with it, clear, what have you, and that's who I want to listen to, which does not mean I'm going to follow it or accept it. So I don't mean anything authoritarian. I don't mean for people to accept what I'm saying, write it down in their notebooks, or remember it, to be passed on undigested. What is said here is said as an offering to test out each one for ourselves, whether what is being said is so or is not so. Take it as a challenge. If it doesn't make sense, don't reject it, don't adopt it. But wonder about it. Or maybe see in the moment. Yes, this is so, I can see that. Or, no, I don't see that. That something doesn't seem clear. So in that case, bring it up in a meeting. I'm not insisting that I'm saying things that are right. It's very difficult to put into words what may be seen and felt clearly. Very difficult. Words are already limiting it, are a source of misunderstanding. Particularly since we listen with our entire past. The brain, at least in the beginning of these things, of these talks, for most of us, listens in a conditioned way in terms of right and wrong, good and bad, and what it wants to hear to feel safe, and what is afraid of hearing because that's threatening. So we come with this baggage to a talk. Very hard to really hear what is being said. That's what we have meetings for. To sort it out, to clarify misunderstandings, or for me to see that something was not put as clearly or accurately as is possible. Because become aware of, if you will, if it's possible, of projection, mechanism projecting stuff onto Toni. Just this last week, someone came to a meeting and I couldn't help myself saying, "Do you realize that you look at me adoringly?" And he laughed. And it's in the way, see, it glazes the eyes. You're just looking at a picture, aren't you? And I'm not a picture. Or the other side of it, either adoringly or feisty or fightingly. So, be aware that this brain will be active or is already actively engaged or has been actively engaged in projecting stuff onto Toni as well as everybody else. And then we insist on our projections, that they're correct, that they reflect reality. Or do we begin to doubt them? Question them, wonder whether there could be moments of living without projections. Sort of seeing each other nakedly. That may be not a good image. Free from pictures. And to notice how this brain is busy, it wants to live in pictures. It's easier for the brain because it wants to be active. It was born to be active. And yet it can have this amazing quietness to it. And when you read in brain books how much area there is in the brain which is totally unused, at times when it is so quiet and open, you can tell there is nothing up there. It's cavernous. So it can be very cooperative, if it will. Not to despair completely over it. I've talked about the burden, which I mean it is a tremendous burden human beings carry. We go to horrendous wars over it, on a large scale and on a small scale. Warring each other's in story, in drama, in ideas. Because we don't want to let go of what we believe is so. Because then the whole foundation seems to shake. The possibilities mentioned that it may not be so. But to shake with the foundation, that's all right. That's not all of us. These structures that have built up about ourselves and each other, the stories, it's not all of us. It's the most insignificant part of us. So, without imagery, without authority, without categorizing our jobs, our positions, people used to tell me there's less of that now. You're playing a role, you just don't admit it. I don't play a role. Why should one play a role? What a handicap. What is our relationship if we don't play roles? And that's possible for human beings like you and me, because I used to be 150% role player. That's how I grew up. Always self-conscious, seeing myself as this or that, wanting to be seen as this or that, and it can, wonder of wonders, drop off. Not forever, we're not talking about forever, but for now, right now. So then how are we related to each other? Without roles. Student, teacher, this, that. Not knowing what we are, but listening to each other. Meeting each other. One knows not how. With an abundance of love and affection and respect for our foibles and difficulties, because one knows them firsthand. We will end here for today.